Buongiorno e benvenuti, sono Monica Sala, Brand Tracking Leader in Ipsos Italia e con me la collega Federica Aceto, responsabile del team di Customer Experience. Oggi siamo qui insieme perché brand ed esperienze sono sempre più interconnesse tra di loro. Le marche per crescere hanno bisogno di offrire ai loro clienti ciò che promettono. E se questo non avviene, le attese dei clienti vengono insoddisfatte e il rapporto tra il brand ed il cliente avrà nel lungo termine una erosione. Questo è molto pericoloso e molto dannoso per la crescita del brand perché, come sappiamo, le persone tendono a spendere di più per le marche con cui hanno dei legami forti. Per approfondire il tema del brand e delle esperienze, ci hanno raggiunto oggi Catherine Barton, Global Equity Lead Brand and Tracking, e Jean-François Demey, Chief Research Officer Global Customer Experience, autori della recente pubblicazione Bridging the Brand Experience Gap. Jean-François ci parlerà delle brand CX Forces che ci consentono di quantificare l'impatto della customer experience nella costruzione dell'equity di brand e ci danno anche una direzione su come allineare la marca e l'esperienza per un successo di brand nel lungo periodo. A seguire, Catherine ci farà vedere le brand CX Forces in action, quindi con dei casi legati al mondo del retail e delle telecomunicazioni. Una nota operativa: se avete delle domande potete scriverle nella chat box e alla fine della presentazione le leggeremo e risponderemo insieme. Adesso passo la parola a Jean-François Demey. Jean-François, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Monica, for this introduction, and hello, everyone. So I think, as Monica mentioned during the introduction, the starting point really is that we are seeing shifting focus in brand building. So brands are increasingly connecting with their customers through experiences. And overall, we are seeing that the connections between brand and customer experience is becoming more important. The role of good customer experience in driving business success is a really hot topic today for several reasons. And if we think about the past 10 years, we've seen that experience has led to some of the most successful businesses. Think about the tech space. For example, Amazon has been built through excellence of customer experience, the availability of customer platforms that are very efficient, good customer service in most cases. And that has had an impact on customer expectations across the board. And it's not just services, actually. Even FMCG brands now these days are increasingly having to create good customer experiences because they're more often than not going direct to consumer. So I think overall, the starting point is that there is a realization that customer experience is not just a process. It's more than that. It's an opportunity to create stronger brands. And if we think about the marketing instruments to drive growth, we can see that experience is one key pillar. Of course, it needs to work very well in a coherent manner with other marketing instruments. So if we think about identity, the idea is that brands can try and build distinctive brand assets to facilitate intuitive choices or attention. It can be a logo, it can be a color, something that customers really identify with the brand. Of course, perceptions are key, and organizations are spending a lot of money, investment in trying to manage how the brand is perceived and how it's mapped in customers' mind, the associations that people have about brands. But the third pillar is the experience. It's actually making sure that the experience delivers on the brand promise. And again, Monica mentioned, when there's a gap between what people expect based on the brand promise and what they actually experience, the consequences are devastating, and we'll talk about that in a second. So what we are saying here is that these three marketing instruments need to work together to maximize the influence on brand choice. When we look at all the studies that we run in the brand and in the CX space, we are seeing that experience is an increasingly important driver of brand relationships. Here, that if you see that visual at the center of the screen, we are showing the top category driver of brand desire. And you can see that a lot of experience-related aspects are coming out. And this is, across a range of categories, from banking to online shopping, telco, and even FMCG. You can see things like, great customer service, ease of understanding, and it's quite a broad area of customer experience related aspects alongside some of the more traditional, let's say, brand related, such as trust or quality perception. So there's a range of experience related factors that are becoming increasingly important when it comes to driving strong brand relationships. We've done quite a lot of R&D around the concept of the brand promise and the delivery gap. So think of it as, what brands say about themselves through communications, and that creates expectations, and what they actually deliver on the ground. And that connection between the two is very important. What we're seeing is that when there is a gap between what customers expect based on the brand promise and what they deliver, customers are very unlikely to engage with an organization, and they're far more likely to start liking the brand less, to adjust their attitude, and they're far more likely also to stop using the brand. So when there is a gap, there is what we call a dissonance. And that's a gap that we need to identify first, and we need to try and reduce or close. But conversely, when the experience consistently reinforces the key values that the brand stands for, then customers grow closer to the brand. There is what we call a form of resonance. So we need to try and identify the cases where there is a gap, and we need to try and harmonize our customer experience delivery and our brand communication. And actually, when there is a gap between the experience and the expectations, we can see that customers react very emotionally. So here, I think this is very telling. We're seeing that 34% of customers who feel that the experience is worse than promised are feeling misled, which is quite a strong term. It means that they feel that the company is lying to them. They feel that they are not valued. They feel upset, not respected. And you can see these are strong emotional reactions. And we know that emotional response is important because over time, it builds some form of emotional attachment or distance. And we know that emotional attachment is a very, very strong component of strong relationships with brands. And our analysis also shows that strong relationships can insulate brands from mistakes. So if you look at the left-hand side of that chart, here we are showing the Net Promoter Score, which is the extent to which customers are likely to recommend a brand. And we're showing the scores amongst people who had a problem, a negative experience. And that score is broken down amongst people who had a low brand relationship overall and a high brand relationship overall. And you can see that the scores, despite the negative experience, are positive for people who had a strong relationships. So it's 24, and it's far more negative for people who have a low brand relationship. So we're not saying that strong relationships can enable brands to provide a poor experience, but we know that there is no such thing as a perfect process. So strong relationship can help brands mitigate the negative impact of mishaps or bad experiences, and that's actually quite important. So if we think about aligning brand and customer experience, we need to have insights. We need to harmonize insights. And I think the concept of silo is very important here. There is no silo in consumers' minds when it comes to brand or customer experience. Customers have expectations based on the communication of the brand, and they experience the brand. So actually, there's no silo. The two things are very connected. But sometimes in organizational structures, we see silos. So, we see a lot of clients where there is a brand department on one side and there is a customer experience department on one side. But the goal is to try and bring them together to try and create that higher level of insights, that harmonized, integrated insights that can really help organizations optimize the CX service design so that it delivers on the offer and the brand promise. And it's very difficult to do that if we are not bringing the essence of brand research and customer experience research together. So we're very pleased to introduce our latest framework, which has been built through extensive R&D. It's called Brand CX Forces. It's an integrated measurement approach that really helps to understand how customer experience impacts brand growth. It's a framework that we can use in one holistic study that can help us assess the interplay, the relationships, if you want, between brand and CX aspects to answer very important business questions. The first one on the left is, how do we best align and manage CX and brand activities so that they create that resonance that we talked about earlier? And that resonance will create positive customer outcomes, such as increased share of wallet, increased retention, increased advocacy, etc., etc. So that first business question is around, okay, is there a gap first between expectations and delivery? Is my brand delivering on my promise? And how do I then, if I identify that there is a gap, how do I redesign the customer experience or identify specific aspects in the customer journey that are pain points, if you want? And how do I redesign, how do I optimize them to create that resonance? The second one is a question that a lot of clients are asking us, is how do I prioritize between acquisition and retention? How do I best allocate my spend between trying to acquire more customers and also keeping more customers? And that framework enables us to almost identify the value associated with converting prospects into customers, but also the value that current customers bring to the organization and the potential value associated with driving more loyalty amongst our current users. In a way, if you think about the fact that organizations invest a lot of money to acquire more customers, but there's little point in acquiring more customers if we don't then invest in keeping these customers happy so that they become loyal customers. So that balance is a strategic shift and priority, and the framework can help us to decide whether we should focus first on trying to acquire more customers or making sure that the customer that we have acquired are happy and can engage in strong relationships. And on the right-hand side, finally, once we've decided on the overall strategic direction, acquisition or retention, how do we build targeted strategies? How do I understand which types of customers I should target from a different brand to try and acquire customers, or who are my at-risk customers that are likely to churn and to go to another brand? So we are getting these kind of diagnostics across the market to attack for competitive advantage and also defend against competitive threats. And so how do we do that? Well, we do that by using two assets or solutions that we have in Ipsos. The first one is called Brand Value Creator, which is Ipsos powerful and validated equity measurement system. It's essentially something that provides a view of the strengths of brands in the market. It works by measuring brand equity or brand desire, which is a very pure measure of attitudinal desire towards a brand. But it also includes what we call market effects, which are the factors that can explain external factors that might explain the disconnect between what people would like to do and what they are able to do. We know that sometimes people are not able to do what they would like to do or to choose the brands that they would like to do business with for factors such as accessibility or price, etc., etc. So we're including these market effects to come up with a validated measure of effective equity, which is, as you can see on the scattered chart here, very highly correlated to market share. So that brand value creator gives us, if you want, a view of the performance of the brands across the competitive set. And we then use what forces of customer experience, which is a model that's grounded in behavioral science, which tells us about customers' expectations of the relationship that they have with brands. These are, if you want, the dimension that you can see here are the fundamental needs that customers have when it comes to their relationship with brands. And it really enables organizations to have a relational view of customer experience and not just a transactional view. So it's all about designing customer experience so that customers feel a sense of, for example, fair treatment, or a sense of control, a sense of certainty, a sense of belonging, status, or enjoyment. We won't have time to go through in detail, all the different aspects of these 6 forces. There is a point of view that you can access, which is called the forces of customer experience. But overall, this framework introduces 6 dimensions that are validated predictors of relationship strengths. And it's a very powerful framework to help organizations design customer experiences that are more likely to drive stronger attachment and stronger relationships with customers. And finally, this is one of the key sort of outputs that we can bring using brand CX forces, is the identification of whether there is a gap between the promise and delivery. On the horizontal axis, you have what we call CX delivery strengths, into which the customer experience is well delivered. And on the vertical axis, you have a measure of brand desire, or think of it as the attractiveness of the brand in the market. So on the top left, where you have brand 1 and brand 4, you have brands that have managed to create a lot of interest, but actually they're not delivering the customer experience very well. So there is a gap between the promise and the delivery. So that's not the right spot to be in. But if you look at the top right, we have brands that have managed to create some form of attraction or interest in the market. And on top of that, they're also delivering very well. So these brands, for these brands, the promise and the delivery are aligned, and they're more likely to create some form of resonance. So that's one of the most fundamental analyses that we can provide. Of course, there is a lot of diagnostics at the back of that. And I'm now going to hand over to Catherine, who will show you some real examples of what that kind of analysis can bring. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Jayed. Hello, everybody. I'm really happy to share with you a case study which looks at brand CX forces from the grocery retailer market in Ontario in Canada. Last year, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, grocery retailers in Ontario picked up some changes in shopper behavior, where some people were moving away from shopping at discount grocery stores, preferring to shop instead at the more premium full-service stores in an effort to limit their exposure to busy stores and also to ensure that they could get everything they needed in one shopping trip. Now, we picked up these shifting dynamics in our brand equity tracking work, and we'd seen a shift in rank position amongst the leading grocery retailer brands in the preceding months. So the aim of our Brand CX Forces study was to find out how this trend will impact the future market share of the leading brands in Ontario. We wanted to find out what each brand needed to do in order to either capitalize on these shifting dynamics, or in the case of the brands who had lost share, to win back that share that they had lost to competitors. Now, when we have a look at our total market overview, this is the detail from the brand value creator model that Jean-Francois was explaining earlier, where we break out brands in terms of their levels of brand desire, the market effects, and their overall effective equity, which represents their market share. Now, just having a look at Costco and Walmart, the number 2 and 3 ranked brands, what we see here is that they actually have overall share in the market, which you can see by their levels of effective equity over here. But when we have a look at the levels of brand desire, we can see that Costco is actually a more loved brand because it has higher levels of desire. In fact, it is the same as the market-leading brand No Frills. But what makes Walmart stronger and equal in terms of their overall share in the market is the positive impact of market effects due to their competitive prices, ease of accessibility, and range of products. Now, when we have a look at the analysis of brand desire, we go deeper into the details to try and find out the sources of these brands' strengths. Now, the first thing that we can see on the right-hand side of the chart over here is the percentage of users or the shoppers who are currently shopping at these grocery stores. What we could see for Costco is that they have 51% of people who are currently shopping at this brand, whereas Walmart has got many more shoppers. In fact, 65% of the market are shopping at Walmart for their groceries. So we have got two brands who are looking a little bit different, but at the end of the day, the reason for Costco's strength is because the level of attachment or the relationship strength amongst the customers, even though there are few of them, is much higher than it is for Walmart amongst its customers. So this level of diagnosis helps us to understand what sort of strategic priority there might be for these two brands. And in this case, it is clear that Costco may have good potential to grow by customer acquisition, whereas with Walmart, they already have a good number of customers, but the relationship strength is low. So the strategic priority for Walmart would be to grow and improve the levels of desire. As Jean-Francois mentioned earlier, we have lots of diagnostics and KPIs that we can have a look at to understand how the brands need to grow and what they need to do in order to achieve that. So here we have got all the brands that we included in our study, which is a market representative view, and we compare them against each other in terms of all the key performance indicators. But for now, we're just going to have a look at a comparison between Costco and Walmart. What we can see here is a summary of the market share and the levels of brand desire that we saw on the previous chart. But the new information that we have is to show the performance on the forces of CX that Jean-Francois was speaking about earlier. And immediately what we can see is that Costco is the best brand in terms of its performance on the forces of CX, which is probably contributing to the relationship strength that we saw amongst its customers on the previous chart. Whereas we can see that Walmart, even though it's doing better than some of the other brands, is not as good as Costco in terms of its forces of CX performance. When we have a look at the delivery strength, which is how the brand is perceived to deliver on what it promises, again, we can see that Costco outperforms all of the brands and in particular is way above the delivery strength of Walmart. Then, as JF mentioned earlier, in terms of targeting, what we also do is we quantify the number of people who are at risk of switching to a competitor brand. And unfortunately for Walmart, our analysis showed that 17% of their existing customer base was at risk of switching to another competitor, whereas Costco's customer base is much more stable with only 9% of people at risk. Then in terms of the gap between the promise and the delivery, we see that Walmart unfortunately has a gap between what they promise and what they deliver, whereas Costco's promise and delivery are aligned, so they are in a much better position. And then finally, we have a measure that allows us to assess whether the brand has a likelihood to grow amongst its existing customer base, or whether it shows decline potential, or whether it will be stable in the future. And for Costco, again, we see some positive indicators that there is growth potential amongst the existing customer base in the near future, whereas for Walmart, its future outlook is stable amongst the customers. So what we can see here is that Costco really is in a much better position to capitalize on winning the share battle as customers review the way they are shopping at this point in time. They have good potential to grow through acquisition and get more people. For Walmart, however, they need to be careful about their future growth strategies and make sure that they don't get more customers at risk of defecting. And they really need to work out how they can close their promised delivery gap. With our brand mental networks analysis technique, we are able to discover what people think about brands in their own words. We group people's spontaneous responses into themes, which we quantify, and we can see what items are unique to a brand or shared across the different brands that we are measuring in a market. Brand mental networks also allows us to uncover any negative sentiment, which is often missed in traditional surveys. So it's a wonderful tool to help us understand what is salient or top of mind for people when it comes to brands in a market. Looking at the table on the right-hand side, we can see that Walmart is mostly associated with a wide range of products, one-stop shop, great prices, and being convenient, as well as its price matching approach, which are all positive. But these are unfortunately not unique associations and are shared across other brands. So what we can see in the map over here is that Walmart doesn't really have a defining identity. And as Jean-Francois mentioned earlier, identity is a key area for which brands can use to influence growth. Costco, on the other hand, has a much more distinctive mental network, being uniquely associated with bulk and wholesale shopping, which we can see over here. And it is the biggest theme that is associated with this brand, and that it also requires a membership, which is a much more defining identity. So when people think about Costco, they have a very clear idea of what they might expect from this brand. However, as I mentioned earlier, because brand mental networks also allows us to uncover negative sentiment, we can see here that there are some mentions of busy and crowded stores, which is something that this brand really needs to guard against if it is to acquire new customers to become regular shoppers. Now, when we have a look at the promised delivery gap, we can see that there is a gap for Walmart in terms of how shoppers experience the brand. Now, you'll see here that we've included all the brands in the promised delivery matrix here, so we can get an idea of how the brands compare against each other. And unfortunately for Walmart, we see that they really are not delivering well on their promises, despite the fact that they have got a reasonable level of brand desire. Whereas Costco really outperforms all the brands in terms of not only the delivery strength, but also in terms of the promise. So again, it's a fantastic position for Costco to be in. I think it really reaffirms the fact that Costco is in a very good position to grow through acquisition. However, they need to make sure that the busy and crowded stores that we picked up in the previous chart is guarded against, something that they should fix in the future. Now, this analysis is really important for brands. As Jean-Francois explained earlier, cognitive dissonance occurs when the experience and the promise do not match up. When customer experiences consistently fail to meet expectations, customers will most likely adjust their attitude towards the brand. In other words, they'll love them less, or they'll adjust their behavior towards the brand, use them less, or stop shopping there altogether. Conversely, when we have a situation like Costco, where the experience consistently reinforces the brand promise, customers grow closer to the brand and use it more in the future. So if this continues for Walmart and people adjust their attitude to become even less committed than they already are, this will have a serious financial impact on the brand's revenues, which we are able to measure. Walmart already has a very large customer base, as we saw previously, but there's a very good opportunity for them to improve levels of desire. But in order to do this, the gap between the brand's promise and delivery needs to be closed. JF spoke earlier about the instruments of brand growth of perception, identity, and experience. Here we have a summary that shows how Costco has positive perceptions, a very clear identity, and is delivering well on the customer experience. From this, we can be sure that Costco is well placed to grow its share further through acquiring more customers more often to be the market-leading brand in Ontario. But what does Costco need to do in order to achieve this growth? In this chart here, we have the results of the Ipsos BaseNet drivers analysis, which is central to our brand CX Forces approach. And this analysis looks at the impact of various elements in terms of driving brand desire, as well as the connections and interrelationships between the different elements. The biggest impacts on desire have bigger circles, and those are the ones that must be prioritized over others if we are wanting to see a change and an impact in terms of brand desire. So the biggest impacts have bigger circles, and in this map, what we see is that the bigger circles have direct impacts in terms of driving brand desire. Now looking at the area shaded in red towards the bottom of the map, we can see that great quality for the price is an essential driver of desire for Costco, and it already has a relative strength compared to Walmart. So this is something that Costco needs to maintain. Competitive prices, on the other hand, is Walmart territory. So this is not an area for Costco to further explore. They must rather continue to demonstrate and communicate and offer quality for the price that you pay. Connected to quality, we can see on the map, is the right product selection, which is also a key driver of brand desire. Maintaining their range of products on offer and services that provide enjoyment, which is one of the forces of CX at the bottom of the chart there, will also help to reinforce these particular areas. And Costco is already on a good pathway here, and so all of these areas need to be maintained. Because we saw earlier that the Costco shopping experience already delivers on the promise, Costco must maintain the areas that we have shaded in blue, which are essentially the hygiene factors of things that you would expect when you are shopping at a grocery retailer store, so that customers continue to enjoy that pleasant shopping experience that Costco is known for. Now, Costco already has the capacity and credentials to focus on the higher order needs, which are shaded in green towards the top of the chart, through connecting with people and making them feel valued to foster a sense of belonging. And again, these are the forces of CX, and we can see just how important they are in terms of driving brand desire and relationships with Costco. Now, what you'll see here is that staff is actually a key component of this. So the people who are working at the store, really, really important to deliver these values as well. So Costco should consider investing in their staff to ensure that they support the need for status. Now, this is just an extract of our case study. In the full case study, we conclude that the market leaders find themselves in very different situations and will have to employ very different strategies to maintain their leading positions in the Canadian market. And with that, Monica, it's over to you.
Grazie Katrin. Sì, prima della presentazione del secondo studio vediamo insieme alcuni risultati della survey che abbiamo lanciato insieme a questo webinar, in cui vi abbiamo chiesto di pensare al vostro principale gestore di telefonia mobile e in particolare vi abbiamo chiesto di scrivere tutto ciò che vi veniva in mente rispetto a questa marca, quindi pensando ai colori, ai suoni, al prodotto, ai vostri ricordi, alle esperienze passate, alle sensazioni, agli aspetti che vi sono piaciuti di più oppure di meno, a tutti i pensieri positivi e negativi. In sostanza questa è una mappa mentale che abbiamo visto prima con Katrin, Brand Mental Network, che abbiamo elaborato però a totale categoria. E quindi qua vediamo rappresentati quelli che sono i temi principali che ci avete restituito rispetto al mercato appunto del gestore della telefonia mobile e le loro connessioni. Quindi c'è una ricchezza di temi che riguardano, afferiscono diciamo all'area della comunicazione e all'area visiva in cui le marche si presentano. Ci sono dei temi che riguardano il percepito d'immagine, ci sono dei temi che riguardano in modo particolare le caratteristiche che appunto le marche hanno e che vengono riconosciute. E insieme a questi temi uno molto importante è anche l'esperienza, quindi oltre agli aspetti visivi, quindi al rosso molto, molto forte, molto ricordato, al blu, all'arancione, che sono collegati alla pubblicità e al logo, oltre alle ampie coperture che quindi si riferiscono alla rete, alla sua velocità, alle offerte, alle promozioni che ci avete restituito, un tema è anche quella del servizio, che viene negativamente valutato per appunto i vostri gestori. Quindi la componente di esperienza con il servizio clienti è uno degli elementi, è uno dei temi che rientrano nella ricostruzione mentale delle associazioni che vengono fatte, che sono state fatte per le vostre, il vostro gestore. Quindi è un tema importante e in qualche modo spontaneamente centrale alle associazioni nel mercato. E poi una seconda pagina in cui vogliamo raccontare la soddisfazione, quindi una parte di voi si è dimostrata insoddisfatta rispetto diciamo, al gestore attualmente diciamo, a disposizione, e quindi quali sono i motivi di insoddisfazione, anche qui restituiti spontaneamente. C'è sicuramente un tema di servizio clienti, quindi che si riconcilia con il dato che abbiamo visto prima, e poi c'è un tema che riguarda il prezzo e riguarda anche tariffe poco chiare, offerte poco chiare. C'è una forte presenza di una mancanza di chiarezza che risuona molto con una delle branding forces presentate prima da Jean-François, quindi quella del fair treatment, e che vedremo con il successivo case study sulle mondo delle telecomunicazioni essere molto importante nella costruzione dell'equity di marca. Adesso io passo la parola a Katrin. Hi Katrin. Ok.
Thank you, grazie. Okay, so I'd like to take you through a very short extract from a case study. We ran a study, a brand CX forces study in the telecommunications market in the UK last month. So this is fresh data. And what we can see here is that we have got two brands that really dominate the market, EE and O2, and then we have Vodafone in third position. So we've got these brands that dominate the market, and our measure of future growth potential, which is brand spotlight over here, we can see that most of these brands have got a stable outlook, indicating that if everything stays the same as it is now, these brands are not likely to show any significant growth or decline in the coming 12 months. When we have a look at the levels of brand desire, we can see that these brands are really characterized by high commitment, as indicated by the level of green that we see amongst users. And this is because it is a single-use repertoire market. People are using on average 1.2 brands, even though at any point in time, people are either using or considering a total of 5 brands. So with the stable outlook that we saw amongst the leading brands, at these high levels of commitment, and in a market that is heavily driven by brand desire, where market effects do not play a significant role in terms of impacting people's behavior, how can brands achieve growth? How can these brands convince people to switch providers or to get more people to take out a new contract over and above the one that they already have? Now here we turn to our Ipsos BaseNet's drivers analysis, which shows us what people are looking for in the telecommunications category in the UK as a whole. What we can see here is that the most impactful drivers of desire are also the ones that are directly connected to desire, and we can clearly see that these areas go beyond just the transactional elements. And this is very much in line with the category trends that we have seen in the UK, in the telco market more broadly across the world. Broadly speaking, it's about fair treatment, which is one of the forces of CX, great service, and being a part of my everyday life. As Jean-Francois mentioned earlier, functional performance and smooth delivery mechanisms are important, but it takes more to create meaningful customer-company interactions and positive memories that lead to strong and profitable brand relationships. And we really have evidence of this right here. We know that customer expectations are becoming much more liquid across categories, and we can see that people expect more from their service provider than just the basics. Now, fair treatment here is a gateway driver that is connected to control, certainty, transparency, and more. So improving perceptions in this area will have a positive spillover effect onto other important areas that will lead to brand growth. When we have a look at the promise delivery matrix, we can see that there's only one brand here which is delivering in line with expectations, and that is Tesco Mobile. And the market-leading brands O2 and EE have a gap between what they promise and how they deliver. So to explain this, Tesco Mobile is not one of the market-leading brands. In fact, it's only 5th placed in the market. What we can see is the reason for their success is that they outperform all the other brands amongst their customers on delivering on all of the forces of CX besides enjoyment. So this is really a great positive indicator for Tesco to see that they would be able to grow by improving their delivery to more customers and showing that they actually have the potential to do this because they are delivering well on their promises amongst their existing customer base. So they are in a good position to further reach more people through encouraging people to take up more contracts. So this is just an extract from our 4th case study, which goes into much more detail about the pathways that each of the brands needs to follow in order to either maintain their leading positions or to challenge the market leaders. Federica, it's over to you. Oh, before I go, one more thing I just wanted to say is that we have our paper, Bridging the Brand Experience Gap, which you can read all about the forces of CX and the details behind the R&D that we use to come up with this approach.
Thanks, Catherine, and thanks to the experts. I see that we don't have a question from the audience, but I think that we can do just one question coming from other talks with our clients, because we talked about the relationship between customer experience and brand, the importance of this approach to understand the relationship. But usually we know that the clients have different research in place for brand and for customer experience. So which is the best way to use this approach in the ecosystem of research in a company?
Thanks, Federica. So I think it's a good question. This framework is an additional layer of insights that takes some elements of brand play. Customers, of course, we can look at segments, action, either some of the communications tracking or brand track we have. So for understanding things from but also strategy that can be your organization, so some of the customer tracking. So it does not replace it's an additional layer of information.
Okay. I think that we are a little bit late, so we can say thank you to our audience. And obviously, if you have questions for us, you can contact us after the webinar. Grazie a tutti per la partecipazione e grazie ai nostri esperti per il webinar.
Grazie, buona giornata.